Okay, next up, another fairly common thing we want to do is having hovering effects. So in the course of the course, we talked a fair bit about mouse over events. We experimented with those, particularly when it came to pop-ups, and I think it was mainly with pop-ups. But hovering effects are a little bit different. They're still kind of along the same lines, so they won't be really, really hard to understand. But basically what we're talking about is in something like a leaflet, it's just hovering over a polygon and having it change color or something like that. We already know how to open the pop-up by doing this, And in MapLibra, we have some same kind of thing, like as we hover over polygons, it's a really good way to indicate to the user what they're doing, what they're hovering over at the moment before they actually click something. So this might have been a nice thing in our little McDonald's one if we wanted to make it even clearer to the user exactly which state they were hovering over. So how do we do this? Well, in Leaflet, it's fairly straightforward. We create our stuff. We make a polygon. Here we go. We created the polygon, l.polygon. We bound a pop-up to it. Let's just see that we have that pop-up. Yep, we do. And then we make a mouse over event on the polygon. So we do polygon.on, mouse over. And when we mouse over, I've console logged just so you can see, whatever. There's the polygon itself is returned in that little event when we mouse over. So this e.target is the actual, right here, this is the actual polygon that we've hovered over, like the leaflet object that we create. It's basically, it's this thing here is what e.target is. So we can access that original polygon in the event where we mouse over it. So what we do is, here I've just saved it, but we didn't need to do that. I could have just done e.target.setStyle. Set style is what you can use after you've created a shape or a polygon or whatever to change some of its styling in Leaflet. So we have it here with set style, and the set style can do all kinds of things. It can change the opacity, it can change the color, the stroke, the weight, the fill color, all that. Any of the stuff that you had set when you created the polygon using like color or anything like that, you can use set style to do that later in a dynamic way on demand. So on the mouse over, I set the style to green, and on the mouse out, I set it back to blue. And that gives it this nice feeling of like, oh, I've hovered over and I've hovered away. And it just works very, very easily, no problem. And you can do this with tons of different shapes. You could, set the style dynamically based on some property of them. Oh, they're a certain category, we change them to a certain color, that sort of thing. So in Leaflet, fairly straightforward. You just add events onto the polygons that you create or the lines you create or whatever it might be. Now in Mapbox / MapLibra, it's definitely more complicated. There's a specific kind of setup you have to do to really make this work quickly. And this is, again, because of that sort of fundamental way that MapLibra works, where we're not adding these features one at a time. Instead, this is a whole layer. This is one layer. So having one layer like this means that we have to have some like special code. In this case, we have to have a Mapbox expression like we used in our example project. We have to have a Mapbox expression that will do this hovering stuff for us. Now, I really think it's totally fine to just copy paste the example code for this, which is basically, I think that's exactly what I've done in this video. So really all you're going to do is look up hover effect MapLibra and just take the code that you find here. And this is what we're going to look at. So I'll just walk you through it, but this is basically exactly what I've done. And I still use this when it comes to doing this for my own projects. I more or less copy the part that has to do with all the mouse events and then just change things so that I'm pointing at the right sources and the right layers and stuff like that. So totally fine to just lift this from the example stuff. So, okay, we add a source. In this case, it's a GeoJSON of the US states. Fine, we call that states. Then we add one layer called state fills, which is the actual polygons. And we add another layer that is a line for the borders. Okay, we're kind of along those lines. And there's this special thing for the fill opacity, which is what is going to change when we hover over. If we look at what we hover, it's not actually the color doesn't change, it's the opacity. Like it goes from being a very transparent to being completely opaque. So that's what changes there. And basically that you create this little thing whatever, it's feature state, hover, false. And then the first one you give, the first thing you give here in this little case expression is the opacity that it should be when it's hovered. And the second one is the opacity that it should be when it's not being hovered. So if we change this so that it became fill color instead of fill opacity, we would put the color it should be when it's being hovered and the color it should be when it's not being hovered. You don't really need to understand this part. That's not important. But you should know that the second last one is what it is when it's being hovered, and the last one is when it's not being hovered. And that's what you can change to make it your own. You know, like if I wanted to make them completely transparent when I hover, I could do that. And then when it loads, it'll go completely transparent, right? Because I'm telling it what happens, what opacity it should be. Okay. Now, we have this series of mouse events. We have a mouse move event and a mouse leave event, which is basically the same as a mouse out. It's not really a big deal. In this case, we use mouse leave for a particular reason, so stick with it. No problem. No need to change it. We do a mouse move. We're only listening to it on the state fills. So this is one that you would have to change if you're using this in your own layer. We check to see if there's any features. And then we actually have had this little hovered state ID global variable that we're holding. And basically what that does is it's MapLibra checking to see if something else is already being hovered, okay? And if something's not being hovered, if something is, whatever, it's doing this whole check. Then it does this set feature state. We don't really have to know what this does. We just have to know that states is, we change that from our original source. So if our source is called something different, we change that here. And then there's all this other stuff, we change it here as well. And then on the mouse leave, we change it in this one as well and change this layer. Now a bit about what's happening. You can see here that if it's hovered, it sets the hover to false. And then it sets whatever one you're currently hovering over to true. And on leaving it, it sets the hover to false. This is kind of a tricky bit. It's a little hard to understand, but it basically has to do with like, oh, you know, you were hovering over something, but now you're on a different feature on the same layer. So unhover effect the one you were just on. So you didn't actually like mouse leave the whole layer. You just left that one feature. So this is what allows us, if we comment this out, right, you'll be able to see what the effect actually is. It's that it won't unhover, because until I leave, it doesn't, you know, it unhovers the one I'm leaving from, but it doesn't unhover all of them. And so this lets it de-hover when we're still mousing over in the same layer. One important thing here is that your original data should have IDs, unique IDs on the GeoJSONs. So here, do we have them here? I'm just looking to see if we actually have them. We have state properties. We have, right here, this ID, okay? So let's look at this in a bit easier way. What's an easier way to look at this? One sec. We'll move this into something that format JSON. We'll format this and we'll be able to look at it a bit more clearly. So it's really, this doesn't work unless you have something like an ID on the actual feature itself. So I'm going to make the geometry smaller. You see this ID here. You'll also see it here, and they're unique. Without this, it won't actually work. I don't know if they mention that in this. They don't really talk about it, but I think they say it. No, they don't say it at all. So this is something you need. If you don't have this ID, and it's not in the properties, you'll see, it's just here on the feature. You can do this like as you're adding it, you can just use like math.random to create this ID or whatever, but you need to have it in order for this hover effect to work. So make sure to check that on your data if something's not working or it's not, or you're getting an error message that says you need to have a unique ID. Other than that, just like I said, copy paste this code. Don't worry about it too much. And that'll get you doing hover effects in Mapbox and MapLibra and Leaflet. So see you in the next one.